What's up, everybody? It's Jordan, and welcome to the Sports 2 Hine Show. Today is November 3rd, 2021, and on today's episode, we have so much to talk about. The college football playoff rankings were released last night. I'll talk about my rankings and why this rankings released last night was absolutely pathetic and way worse than anybody could have imagined. Joining me in just a few minutes will be Ken, the sports guy. He's a big New York Jets fan. He was at the Jets Bengals game this past Sunday where my Bengals absolutely blew it and made Mike White look like an MVP. We'll talk about the winners and losers at the NFL trade deadline, Von Miller being traded to the Rams. We'll briefly talk about the Henry Ruggs situation. Jameis Winston and Michael Thomas both out for the year. Derrick Henry is out for 6 to 10 weeks with a foot injury. Rodgers is out against the Kansas City Chiefs. So much more. So like I said, I'll go ahead and start talking about the college football playoff rankings. These, in my opinion, were horrible. The top 6 were, number 6 was Cincinnati, number 5 was Ohio State, number 4 was Oregon, 3 was Michigan State, 2 was Alabama, and 1 was Georgia. I feel like pretty much 100% of America could agree that Georgia should be number 1. If you're not saying Georgia should be number 1, you're probably an Alabama fan. But Alabama number 2 makes zero sense. They lost to a team who they were picked to beat by 19 points with a backup quarterback. A&M's starting quarterback got hurt months and months ago and he's out for the season. So they lost to a backup quarterback even though they were picked to win by 19 points. A&M is very inconsistent. Alabama has not beat anybody that great. They struggled against Tennessee. They've struggled against other teams. They only beat Florida by 2 points. And looking back, that is a horrible performance, especially look at the Gators right now. I mean, they are 2-7 out of Dan Mullen's last 9 games against Power 5 opponents. Florida is looking like hot trash right now. And the fact that you only beat them by 2 doesn't really say much about the Crimson Tide. This looks like, honestly, in my opinion, one of the worst Crimson Tide teams we've seen in several seasons. Number 3 is Michigan State. I don't get this at all. I know they came back and beat Michigan, but this is a Michigan State team who nearly lost to Nebraska in overtime. They've nearly lost a couple other games. They've not really played great in some of their wins. Their wins have been deceiving. Despite getting wins, they haven't really looked good. I don't think they should be number 3. They're not the best team in the Big Ten, and that says a lot for me saying that because I know when you see my rankings, you think I'm a Ohio State fan. I am not at all. I cannot stand Ohio State, but I feel like the disrespect for them in Cincinnati right now is absolutely ridiculous. Number 4 is Oregon. Obviously they beat Ohio State at the beginning of the season without, their best player, Kayvon Thibodeau, the defensive end, who's right now projected to probably go first overall. And Oregon's lost to Stanford. Stanford is right now not ranked. They might not even go to a bowl game. So when you look at Oregon above Ohio State, I understand the head-to-head, but at the same time, at this standpoint, are we going to have Stanford ahead of Oregon just because Stanford beat Oregon? I do not understand this. Right now, if Ohio State played Oregon, it would not be a game. It would be over by halftime. Ohio State would beat them by at least 20 points, in my opinion. Oregon is the worst team, I would say probably in the top 6. Oregon was very fortunate. They played Ohio State at the right time. Look at Ohio State. They're one of the youngest teams in the country playing against a freshman quarterback. Lots of these guys are young for Ohio State. You have Williams, the running back, who's a freshman as well. So you're playing, you're playing in Columbus, which is a very difficult place to win. You have the best win of the college football season so far, getting a very impressive win at the shoe against Ohio State. But look at the time you played them. I feel like that's what we talk about in college football the most. It's great when you have wins against, good teams, but when did you play them? Right now, like when you played them back then, Ohio State was at the worst. You played them right now, like I said, it would not even be close. And Ohio State's number 5. I in a way I get the head-to-head, but I just don't get it. Like Stanford, to me, are you going to put them over Oregon? Are you going to put other teams over this? Like it just doesn't make sense. Right now, Ohio State, in my opinion, is the second best team in the country. They are playing out of their minds. Obviously, they did not beat the spread against Penn State, but I feel part of it was because Penn State was actually very good that game. They played great on all 3 phases of the game. But, they scored over 50 points against Indiana. They scored 50 points in 2 previous games. C.J. Stroud, the game prior to the Penn State game, has had at least 4 touchdowns and over 300 yards in all 3 of those games with no interceptions. He's playing out of his mind right now. And Cincinnati, is number 6. And I know I'm a Bengals fan. If you haven't seen my videos before, I'm a diehard Bengals fan. That does not make me a Bearcats fan. I am not a Cincinnati Bearcats fan at all. But I'm getting sick and tired of the group of 5 hate for no reason. They beat the 10th best team in the country, which is Notre Dame. They beat Indiana. They're undefeated right now. What more do you possibly want them to do? And we're looking at it right now. You see Alabama and Georgia both are 2-1. They're going to play each other in the SEC championship game. If it was right now, there's no way Alabama would beat Georgia. Michigan State will play Ohio State in a couple weeks. Whoever loses that game is more than likely out of the top 4 teams in the college football playoff. And then it's interesting because Oregon, if they went out, there's a good chance Oregon's going to be in the playoffs, which is kind of understandable if they beat Ohio State, and they did have one loss, but that Ohio State win is very impressive. If they went out, I would have no issue with Oregon being in the top 4. But then you look at Oklahoma. Oklahoma's really the odd team out in this. Oklahoma's 8 right now. They've not played anybody great. They've played very, very bad in the games that they've won. They should have lost to Kansas. They should have lost a couple other games. They played horrible against Tulane, who's a 1-win team right now. Even if Cincinnati wins out, which they should, and Georgia beats Alabama, which they should, Ohio State, Michigan State, it can go either way. Whoever loses is out. There's still a realistic chance Cincinnati can miss the college football playoffs. And I'm not trying to overreact just because of one ranking, but when you really look at it, there were some people, including myself, I thought there was a chance Oklahoma could have been higher than Cincinnati. But, Cincinnati's 6, Oklahoma's 8. Oklahoma has not played the best of their schedule. Once they play their best teams of their schedule remaining, they still have to play Oklahoma State, who's, ranks in the top 15. When you play those teams, then there's a realistic chance Cincinnati could be jumped by Oklahoma, and it's a worst-case scenario for the Bobcats. Just to prove that the college football playoffs is nothing more than a group of 5 basically hate rankings, look at this rankings right here. If you can see it, it says not ranked by the playoff committee, but ranked by the AP poll. UTSA is not ranked, which to me is absolutely ridiculous. They're the only team in the country who is not currently ranked in the top 25 who is undefeated. Houston, they are ranked in the AP poll, but they're not in the playoff committee. Coastal Carolina, SMU, Louisiana. If you spot the difference right now and the common denominator, it's the fact that all 5 of these teams are a group of 5 teams. They hate the small schools. That's why they have Cincinnati number 6. And it is ridiculous. If you don't have Cincinnati in the top 4, I think it's stupid. If you had them 5, maybe I could get it. But 6 is absolutely a disgrace to Cincinnati because there's nothing more they can do. They've done everything you've asked them to do, and you still treat them like absolute trash. It's embarrassing. It's ridiculous to college football. This was going to be the year that a group of 5 team possibly could have been in the college football playoffs. Right now, it's still possible, but way, way, way more things have to go their way than originally planned. Cincinnati right now is just absolutely ridiculous at number 6. So that was the college football playoff rankings. Number 6 was Cincinnati, 5 Ohio State, 4 Oregon, 3 Michigan State, 2 Alabama, and number 1 Georgia. Here's my rankings real quick. I have Michigan State number 6. That was a very, very impressive win against Michigan this past week. But like I said, they've played very inconsistent at times. And they should have, honestly, you can make a case they should have had a loss right now. That Nebraska game, they played some bad others. Number 5 is Oregon. I know they have the head-to-head against Ohio State, but they had the worst loss out of these 6 teams. I personally believe Oregon is probably the worst team out of all of these 6 teams in the college football playoff rankings. I don't think they have a shot against any of these teams right now. If they played Ohio State today, it would not be a contest. Number 4 is Alabama. They do not look like the same Alabama team. They lost against A&M, which is a pitiful performance. They played bad against Florida. They played bad against Tennessee. They played bad against other schools. Not the same Alabama team. Number 3 is Cincinnati. There's no way I could have Cincinnati above Ohio State right now. Cincinnati has done everything they possibly can, and they have to be in the top 4, my opinion. There's no reason they shouldn't be in the top 4. Cincinnati is better than Michigan State. Cincinnati is better than Oregon. And I just feel like Cincinnati's not been playing up to their competition as of late. They had a stumbling block against Navy, kind of struggled there. Struggled against, I believe, Tulane. week or so ago. And then number 2, I have to have Ohio State. I know I sound crazy. I know Oregon has the head-to-head. Right now, the 2 best teams in the country are, in my opinion, not even close. It's Georgia and Ohio State, and everybody is a major, major drop-off. Ohio State is playing out of their minds right now. If you're a team, if you have them on your schedule, you might as well go ahead and mark it as a loss. And this Ohio State-Michigan State game is going to help Ohio State's resume. I don't think it's going to be as close as people anticipate. I know that Penn State game was close, but Ohio State did play good. It was just the defense for Penn State really stood out in that game. Obviously, Georgia number 1, but I feel like I know having Ohio State's number 2 is very questionable, but I feel like right now, I know their resume is going to speak for themselves soon, beating Michigan State and probably, Michigan. Ohio State and Georgia, I think, are the 2 best teams in the country. And you see the 2 and 3, Ohio State and Cincinnati. If you're a fan of football and if you live in Ohio, I mean, that's like a dream match. The big brother against little brother, Ohio State against Cincinnati. Luke Fickell's former team, Ohio State. That has amazing, ratings and everything like that. Has potential to be an amazing game. But ultimately, right now, I think Ohio State would win. If Ohio State played all these teams in the top 6, they would beat every single team except Georgia. This was just a horrible, horrible, horrible college football playoff rankings by the committee. I expected it to be bad, but I don't think anybody could have possibly imagined it to be this bad. It's going to be very interesting, next Tuesday with the rankings because, there's some big games this week. So joining me now is Kenny, the sports guy. Kenny was able to attend the Jets-Bengals game this past week. His favorite team, the Jets, was able to defeat my favorite team, the Bengals. Pitiful game by Cincinnati. How you doing today, Kenny?
I'm good, man. How you doing?
I'm doing really, really good. Good. Glad you can be on the show and everything. That's kind of where we're going to start today's topic. You joining the show was the Jets Bengals game. So, what were your kind of initial reactions to the game and just the overall performance of Mike White? And what were your thoughts on the Jets' impressive victory against Cincinnati?
Well, first and foremost, I came into MetLife Stadium with very little expectations because I was expecting like a blowout since Zach Wilson was not playing. So when I got to the stadium, I had to look up who was Mike White. And apparently he was drafted by the Cowboys a couple of years ago, was released, and now signed with the Jets. And in my mind, and I thought that, he's going to throw like 5 interceptions, like a Nathan Peterson kind of game. So when he started to swing the ball well, I was like, who is this guy? And at the end of the game, he threw for over 400 yards. And I was just shocked, to be honest, that the Jets actually beat the Bengals on Halloween Day. It was just amazing.
And it's interesting because you look at the Jets, and the Jets heading into the season, they didn't really have much expectations. Obviously having Wilson that has some other guys, the Jets were one of those teams. Maybe you see 4 or 5 wins, but they're obviously not going to be in the playoffs. To me, I thought the Jets were one of those teams who they might not get many wins, but they're going to be competitive and have those occasional upsets.
Oh yeah,
it's crazy because we're 8 weeks in the NFL season. Week 9 this week, the Jets have 2 wins. But 2 of their wins are against the 2 of the 3 best teams in the AFC, the Titans and the Bengals.
The number 1 seed Titans.
Yeah, and nobody expected that. And at the time, just last week, the number 1 seed Bengals. And this was without Zach Wilson. Mike White was a guy I've seen before. I'm a diehard Marshall fan. And he played at Western Kentucky. They're in the same conference. I've seen Mike White a couple times play in person, and he was a guy who wasn't really great. He was best in those like short intermediate passes, 10, 15 yards. And that's really exactly what, the Jets game plan was absolutely executed perfectly against Cincinnati. Those 4, 5, 6 yard passes to their running backs. Michael Carter had tons of yards.
He was the player of the game.
Yeah, Johnson had lots of receptions as well. They had over 150 receiving yards just within their running backs, which is really unheard of. And it's really surprising against a team like Cincinnati, who we're talking about heading into the Jets game, has a top 10 defense. They were really able to shut down this Baltimore offense the week prior, holding them to just 17 points. So the game plan by the Jets was ran perfectly. And it was surprising that Robert Saleh, who I feel like right now, heading into that Bengals game has kind of had some unnecessarily criticism towards them when you look at all the injuries and how bad their offensive line has been at times. But, with Becton being hurt, Zach Wilson being injured, but looking at, Robert Saleh outcoached Zach Taylor, and Zach Taylor's game plan and his play calls at times were good. There were sometimes like, Tyler Boyd passing to Mixon, Jamar Chase going in the backfield for a rushing attempt. Some of these trick plays, if you watch Bengal games, you're even surprised that he's having these type of play calls.
Yeah, I was shocked.
Then there's other times where he just has these dud play calls, and it's so weird because I said it before we started. Last week, I admitted I was wrong about Zach Taylor. He finally has a very, very impressive win. We're first place in the AFC, and then he has a dud performance this week. And I feel like I may have said I'm sorry that I was wrong about Taylor a little bit too early. But Taylor's game plan. We had over 30 points. 95% of the time, when you score 30 points in the NFL, you're going to win. Our defense coordinator Lou Onamaro was pitiful. This is his third season. I would say there's a good, debate that you would say this was his worst game as a defense coordinator for the Cincinnati Bengals. And lots of Bengal fans, at the end of the game, towards the end, Burrow has that pick, and then the Jets score, and then they're up. And then, the Jets have the ball. It's third and long, and then you think it's going to be a holding penalty, but instead it's unnecessary roughness by Mike Hilton. And this right here. And it's interesting. It should never come down to this. Like, if you want to make like a major excuse, and if we're playing against a great team, I can maybe get it. But when you're playing against the Jets, who are, let's be honest, one of the worst teams in the NFL heading into that game with a backup,
you get no argument from me there.
Yeah, and a backup quarterback who has never started the NFL game, you should never, ever, ever be in that situation where you're coming from behind against a team you were picked to win by 10 points against. This is a Bengals team who's starting to have expectations. And, in this, in that game, they're the number one seed in the AFC. You're playing against a team who had, I believe, tied for the worst record in the AFC. It should not happen. Like, I understand if you want to make excuse in a different scenario against a great team, but when you're playing pitiful against a not good team, when you make excuses like that, you just make yourself look bad and the fan base look bad. Because I feel like we are on the cups of, capable of being in the playoffs and having a playoff win. But when you're a good team, and if you want to be one of these elite teams, you should not be making excuses about one penalty. Possibly, even if that wasn't a penalty, you're still having to go down the field and at least, score, which at times was inconsistent for the Bengals to do. But the complaining of the penalty was just unnecessary. And I feel like the Jets just played overall great. I mean, they won all three phases of the game. The Bengals, shot themselves in the foot. They had opportunities and they just blew it. There was times where you don't really see them mess up this season, but, there's memories of last season where, we just screw up when we shouldn't. It's like the Bengals, it's hard to have expectations for them, and you got to get your hopes up because you're number one seed. You just beat one of the best teams in the NFL, and then you lose to one of the worst teams in the NFL. Just a pitiful performance by the Bengals and a very good performance against the Jets, who have lots of momentum, heading into tomorrow's game against the Colts.
Well, they have to, because Mike White is supposed to be the next Lord and Savior of the Jets right now, and he has to produce now because Zach Wilson is out for, I think, 4 weeks. The Jets' offense is finally clicking after 9 games now, and they need to get it together right now because the division is technically still in play for them. I don't see them winning the division, obviously, but they're like probably at least maybe 3 to 4 games back in their division if they continue to win. But I see the Bills winning the division, obviously. The Patriots are still going to be there because they're still the Patriots because of Bill Belichick. But as for the Jets, I think their schedule is going to be a little bit more in favor of them because they're going to be facing teams that, on paper, that they're going to beat. That should beat, but they won't. But I'm actually excited for Mike White and the Jets this season.
So, obviously the Jets play tomorrow on Thursday Night Football against the Colts. What are your kind of expectations, and what is your score prediction for that one?
I honestly I have no expectations for the Jets. I want to keep it low because if I keep it high, they will usually disappoint me. But I think Carson Wentz is gonna throw a lot of interceptions to the Jets, and surprisingly, it might be a blowout for the Jets. I think Colts defense is a little bit too suspect. Carson Wentz, he's throwing interceptions left and right. The running game isn't really that good in Indianapolis. So my prediction will have to be maybe 24-3 Jets tomorrow.
It's interesting because when you watch Carson Wentz, there's moments where he, has a flash and he just looks great. And then the next play, it's like, what the heck was that? Like, that was horrible. That looks like something a high school quarterback shouldn't even be doing.
Exactly.
Watching the 49ers game, it was pouring rain. I don't remember the receiver he threw to, but it was a terrific, like 50, 60-yard bomb. Amazing pass. Like one of the best passes I've seen by Wentz.
Mm-hmm.
And then like the next drive, he should have threw like two, should have been interceptions, but the corners dropped it because it's raining so hard. But with Carson Wentz and consistency is what really makes this game interesting. And one thing, I don't know if it helps the Jets or not, is because this is on like a short, week. Because the Colts don't really have as much time to prepare for Mike White, who hasn't really seen much experience in the NFL.
Mm-hmm.
So it might be kind of, you don't really have as much time for a game plan against him. But it's interesting because when you look at quarterbacks who had these one great games, we see in the past they just kind of like fall off. Taylor Heineke, played last season in the playoffs. He loses, but he played great. And then you look at this year, he plays good in the primetime game, and he wins against the Giants. But since then, he hasn't really been playing good. I know this is really, off topic. Like I said earlier, I was a big Marshall fan. Rakeem Cato was like amazing around here. He was one of the best quarterbacks in school history.
Yeah, I remember.
He was up there, with Chad Pennington, former Jet, Byron Leftwich, and he didn't really have a chance in the NFL. So he played in the CFL, and it was his first CFL start. He really took like the CFL by storm that 1 week. He had like 4 touchdowns. He nearly had as many touchdowns as he had incompletions. He was phenomenal. Nobody in the CFL really heard of him. And then the following week, he sucked. And then the following week, he sucked. And like the game plans for a quarterback who just has one good game, like these guys, these cool stories who have one good game, and then after that, they just kind of like fall apart. And it's interesting with Mike White. I wouldn't be shocked. We maybe kind of saw a similar resemblance because when you look at Mike White, when it came to the deep ball, he was good, but he was kind of inaccurate at times. But if you study those little 5-6 yard passes, once you start looking at him and his tendencies, they're not going to be hard to stop. So it's interesting this one. I think it'll be a close game. I think the Colts are picked by 10 in this one. I'll probably say the Colts 17-13, but I think it is possible we see the Jets having another upset win because just the inconsistency of Carson Wentz in this Colts team, because they should really be much better than they are. But this Jets team has proven, beating the Titans and beating the Bengals, if they're capable and beating those two teams, they're definitely capable of beating this Colts team tomorrow night.
Well, they're actually more than capable. That's why I chose to for them to beat the Colts because I think their offense is actually clicking. To be honest with you, I think the offense is actually better under Mike White than Zach Wilson. Look, I know Zach Wilson is a rookie and he still has some growing pains to do, but he needs to, learn from Mike White and just watch tape on him and just apply his game to Zach Wilson as well. I think with Mike White, he needs to, have the same plan that he did, against the Bengals with short passes, little moderate plays that get the offense going, and then he could just throw it deep down the field, and he knows he might catch another touchdown pass.
And it's interesting with White. I feel like Wilson, I know it's just one game, but I feel like Wilson can learn some stuff from Mike White because when you watch Wilson play, he's one of those guys, he wants the home run ball every single play.
He does.
40, 50-yard passes, which, we've seen at BYU. He's perfectly capable of doing it. We've seen him do it at BYU. He was terrific. But in the NFL, it's much harder to do those passes because, the yards of separation are much, much closer compared to college. Level of competition, much harder in the NFL. But, having these 5-6 yard passes can benefit Zach Wilson a lot more. They're
Mm-hmm.
much higher completion percentage passes, much more likely to not be a turnover. And even if you get 4 or 5 yards, do it a couple of times to first down instead of, heaving at 20, 30, 40 yards and risking the interception percentage. I don't even know by how much, and even incompletion. So I feel like that standpoint, Wilson can learn a lot from Michael White. And if Wilson can start doing that more often, I feel like this, when he gets healthy, I feel like this Jets team, once they get healthy, they can be really, really talented. I know the offensive line is still kind of an issue, but I think in a year or two, this Jets team is going to be pretty good.
I totally agree. Just give it like 2 to 3 years, and they'll be a playoff contender for sure. They might overtake the Bills in the AFC East one year.
And it's interesting because, last season with the Chargers, the Chargers ended the season strong, having 4 straight wins. And you look at the Chiefs, everybody thought, the Chiefs is going to win the AFC West. And then right now, the Chiefs are the third best team in the AFC West. So, really anything can happen. And, you mentioned playoffs, and it's interesting because, yesterday was a trade deadline. And when you're a playoff caliber team or you're a team who's near the Super Bowl caliber, you got to have that one more step to really elevate your team to the next level and try to take it, instead of a playoff contender, turn it into a Super Bowl contender. And, there wasn't really many trades. Obviously, Von Miller is the one that stood out the most. But, I thought there would have been more trades. But who was someone like the winners and losers, in your opinion, at the trade deadline for all these NFL teams?
Well, I think the winner is clearly the Rams because they acquired Von Miller. When healthy, he's like the best linebacker in the league. And as for the losers, well, there's like a number of teams that didn't really do anything, but they didn't really need to. So let's say, for example, the Cowboys. I would love to see them add another defensive player. And the offense is still top notch. They didn't need another wide receiver. They didn't need another running back. As for the other loser I will have to say maybe the Dolphins and the Texans because of Deshaun Watson. Because over the last few months, Deshaun Watson was linked to being traded to the Miami Dolphins. Like it intensified so much that trade was imminent. But at the 11th hour, the owner of the Miami Dolphins just said no, and he said that he didn't need Watson up to that point. So I would have to say the Dallas Cowboys are the losers. The Miami Dolphins are also losers, and the Houston Texans are also losers. And winners is clearly the Los Angeles Rams.
I would say one winner, obviously, that would be the Rams. You have Von Miller, you have Jalen Ramsey, you have Aaron Donald. It's just absolutely crazy. You've traded to get Ramsey, you've traded to get Stafford and Von Miller. It's like in a Madden franchise, you're doing all these trades, and it's just not fair. Mm-hmm. But, Von Miller is not what he used to be, but I feel like that's just an extra step, an extra piece for this Rams team who's already a Super Bowl contender. They might not be the best team right now, but when you're looking on paper, I feel like the Rams are definitely up there and one of the best teams on paper in the NFL.
Agreed.
For me, you mentioned Dolphins, but I'm going to say the Dolphins for not that reason. I don't feel like this Deshaun Watson trade was necessary right now. Because I know, like, if Deshaun Watson was traded, he could have played for the Dolphins. But even if they went out, there's still a possible chance that they wouldn't even make the playoffs. So I feel like Watson being traded in the offseason is more likely. But with the Dolphins, to me, Xavier Howard, like, I do not understand why you would not trade him. After the season, he still has 3 years on his contract. And, he's one of the more higher paid corners in the league. But by the time his contract ends, that's going to be cheap for a corner. So he doesn't have that bad of a deal as people think. When you look at teams who need corners, I know the Buccaneers, I don't think they have enough cap space, but, they could use some corner help. You look at other teams. You mentioned Dallas. They could use some defensive help. Obviously, the Miami Dolphins are not going to be playoff contenders this year or Super Bowl contenders. Mm-hmm. They might be contenders right now at having the first overall pick. So why would you not trade Xavier Howard for extra first-round pick for a team who possibly, as of right now, looks like it possibly could be in the rebuild mode and something else? The Dolphins do not have their own first-round pick. The Eagles have that pick. They have the San Francisco 49ers first-round pick this season. So once the 49ers start getting healthy and everything, and George Kittle and all those guys come back, the Niners are going to start winning games, and that's really going to affect the Dolphins, where they're going to draft. Since they don't have theirs, you can't rely on your own draft pick having one win. You're not going to have that. So why not trade Howard and get a first and maybe a fourth to help that? You're having 2 first-round picks. Maybe you trade that in hopes of giving more up for Deshaun Watson in the offseason. And something else, one other team I have put winners and losers. I'm going to say for the winners is the Broncos. And I know some people might say that's kind of dumb, but Von Miller, I believe it's the final year of his contract. They got a 2nd and a 3rd-round pick. This is a team who, on paper, is extremely underrated. They could just find that quarterback. I think they are going to be outstanding. And 2nd and 3rd-round pick isn't bad for a team who's kind of in the middle of the bubble. I mean, you can get a starting wide receiver who can develop, or starting another defensive player who can develop as well. So I don't dislike that trade. I understand some people are mad. Why would you trade Von Miller? He's done everything for your franchise. But it felt like he kind of wanted out of Denver, because the Broncos, despite being 500 right now, they are not good. They started off 3-0, but those teams they beat, combined record of 0-9. Like, their record is very deceiving. And I would have them as the winners. And one other loser to me is the Green Bay Packers. With Robert Tonyan out for the season, there is no reason the Packers should have not traded for a tight end. I don't get that at all. And a tight end that really stands out to me, I mentioned Miami, was Mike Gesicki. Mike Gesicki's in the final year of his contract, and the Packers don't have much salary cap right now. But with Gesicki at the final year of his contract, the Packers would be able to make that move. And you could even trade and overpay if you wanted to make that trade to get one of the better tight ends in the league, to help Rodgers get more weapons, because this is the last dance for Rodgers and everything like that. And even Dallas Goedert, the tight end of the Eagles, they're also in a rebuild situation as well. And Gobert's in the final year of his contract too. Evan Ingram, I think he has more drops than touchdowns in his career, and he's hurt half the time. Mm-hmm. But even those 3 tight ends, I felt like could have been so beneficial to the Packers. I was honestly surprised the Packers not make one of those moves, because, now's your chance. Tonyan, put him on just about any other team. He's not going to have that much of an impact. But the fact he's basically your second weapon in Green Bay, now he's out for the season. And even when Devontae Adams was out, Rodgers, he didn't have as good as weapons. When you have guys like Randall Cobb having to step up, and I know other guys was out as well. But not getting a tight end from Green Bay, I thought was really, really the wrong decision. I know some people think, stay put. You have the best record in the league. Just keep it that way. But you have to make that one extra step to make your help your team even more. To, instead of being in the NFC Championship game and losing every year, getting one more impact player and making the Super Bowl instead.
What about the Kansas City Chiefs? I have them as a loser also.
I don't know. They're kind of in the bubble. Like, I don't feel like. I don't know. They don't have a ton of cap space. I like the Melvin Ingram trade. They traded a 6th-round pick for him. I don't dislike it, but he's coming towards the end of his career. Like, yeah, I would if I had to pick, I would probably put the Chiefs more as a loser than the winner, because this is the Chiefs team, who is not good right now. They're eventually going to get better, but if you give them some more pieces, they're going to get better and have the expectations like they once were heading into the season. And they're one of those teams. They're not going to have these guys in contracts forever, because they paid Mahomes a stupid amount of money. So
$500 million.
Yeah, I could get why the Chiefs would be losers.
Well, I think they should have added more pieces to their defense and the O-line as well. And also another running back couldn't hurt, because that offense right now is, I hate to say it, it's a little bit stagnant. But it's not the offense's fault. It's more of Patrick Mahomes, because Mahomes is getting really, really cocky on his throws. And it actually shows, like, when you watch him on tape. Say, for example, like the last game, the game against the Titans, he threw an interception while he was sacked, which is unnecessary. And I feel like Mahomes is I wouldn't say Mahomes is losing it. He's losing his skills, because he's still one of the best quarterbacks in the league. But he's just getting more and more cocky every game, and that's not good at all.
And you mentioned that play. That play probably won't be shown on ESPN, but when Mahomes does a simple 15-yard pass to Kelsey for a touchdown, that'll be all over ESPN.
Exactly.
I do not get. I've never understood the obsession with Mahomes. Matthew Stafford has done plays like that for over a decade in the Lions, but nobody cared, or nobody even listened or looked or anything, because he played for one of the most embarrassing franchises in NFL history were the Detroit Lions, and they didn't win games. But when Stafford does it with the Rams, did you see what Stafford did? It's very aggravating, but it's interesting. There's lots of things with the deadline. Kind of expecting more trades to happen yesterday, and kind of staying in the AFC West, but not for a good reason. Yesterday was supposed to be, trade deadline. Watson could be dealt. Everybody could be dealt. There's going to be tons of trades. It was very weird because I don't know, the mood kind of changed, yesterday when everybody's talking about the trade deadline. Obviously, if you haven't heard by now, if you're watching, Henry Ruggs was involved in a, DUI, car crash that actually killed someone and that person's dog. And I looked at my phone the car before we started. I believe Henry Ruggs' car was going 162 miles per hour 2 seconds before the crash. Like, to me, I don't really want to talk about this for a long time. I'm just simply going to say Henry Ruggs 100% deserves jail time or prison time, whatever. He should never, ever, 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 ever play an NFL snap in the NFL again. This is just, it's so ridiculous when you have the money and you're capable of calling an Uber or a taxi or something like that, and you don't, and you could have prevented this. It's just so frustrating because, we've talked about the Deshaun Watson allegations, but I mean, to me, this just, overtops it because this took someone's life that really could have been prevented. It's just a sucky situation.
Well, I agree. I think he deserves a jail time. I think my condolences go out to the victim. And this is just an unnecessary tragedy that didn't need to happen. All he had to do was just call Uber or Lyft, and the girl would be still alive along with her dog. It's just a really, really, really sad situation. And I wish nothing but peace to the victim.
And it sucks because you hear people say, "Oh, well, Ruggs, pray for Ruggs and all that stuff." Like, to me, that's like, there's no issue with praying for somebody and having a thoughts and stuff like that, but it's very aggravating when he's the one who caused this and he took someone's life, and it just sucks to see because I mean, it easily could have been prevented, and his career's over, that person's life's over, that dog's over. I mean, it sucks because it's one of those things like it should never happen because it easily could have been prevented. But yesterday, there was kind of talks about this, like, switching gears. There was talks maybe the Saints could make a move for a quarterback. Jameis Winston was announced he's out for the season. I believe Taysom Hill is injured right now. There was rumors about maybe Sean Payton could call Drew Brees to come out of retirement. And today, I woke up with the news that Michael Thomas was out for the season, which sucks because I elected to keep Michael Thomas in one of my dynasty football leagues instead of keeping DJ Moore. So I'm really ticked off about that. But, with Michael Thomas, he's been out. He hasn't played a snap for the Saints so far. And the Saints have a very, very, very impressive win against the Buccaneers this past week, scoring over 30 points, basically with Trevor Siemian the majority of the game. And you look at it, the Saints, they only have 2 losses. I believe they're 5-2 right now, something like that. And they're without their starting quarterback. They've been out with their number 1 receiver for the whole season. So I was kind of surprised the Saints didn't make any moves. And now it's interesting. Maybe the Saints could, sign a quarterback or, sign a top or wide receiver. What are your kind of whole thoughts on this, injury situation going on in New Orleans?
Well, I don't know how in the world they beat the Buccaneers last Sunday, but somehow they put it off. And I think Winston being out for the season is going to hurt this team. But they do have Taysom Hill, but I don't know if he's injured or not. But there's also one name out there that Sean Payton might call, and it's probably the most unlikeliest candidate. It's Phillip Rivers. So reportedly, Rivers he gave an interview with a journalist, and he said, "Oh, if the Saints give me a call, I would gladly come out of retirement." So maybe Phillip Rivers might be a good sense for the Saints offense since he's out. He's 1 year out for this last NFL game. He can still sling the ball around, and despite the depleted offense that the Saints have, I think calling Rivers right now it would be like your best bet for the Saints. I mean, they need a quarterback. Taysom Hill's injury is not. It could be considered long term or short term. But if I was the Saints, I would just call Phillip Rivers and have him join the team or a tryout.
And I feel like that would probably, like, if you're going to sign a quarterback, that's obviously the best option. Because when you
Mm-hmm.
start looking at Phillip Rivers, I mean, he's going to be a future Hall of Famer. And I feel like if you sign Phillip Rivers, it's not going to bring the as much, I don't know, I guess bad media attention if you maybe signed a guy like Cam Newton or something like that. Because I know some people, Cam Newton was vocal about not being signed, and then he had the vaccine, so then maybe a team would sign him. But if I'm the Saints, I would consider signing Rivers more than Newton because Rivers fits Drew Brees' playing style. He's been
Exactly.
for real forever, much different than Cam Newton. Cam Newton does not really fit that mold for a Sean Payton quarterback. But I don't know if right now would be the time. I feel like if the Saints won 1 or 2 more games, then I would definitely do it if I'm New Orleans. But right now, I feel like I know you're 5-2, but you still had to play the Buccaneers. You still had to play the Panthers, who should be better. The Falcons have improved a little bit. They don't have an easy schedule. If they're still able to get maybe 1 or 2, and then all of a sudden, like you're 6-2, 7-2, something like that, it's not consider it. Right now, I think this is a tad bit too early for somebody to come out of retirement who just retired. But if they went the next 2 games, something like that, I'm all for it. But I think maybe just give it a week or two, and then we'll see. But I would love to see Rivers in New Orleans. I think it'll be a perfect spot. And think about it, even the limited times Rivers would be, limited amount of time Rivers would be in New Orleans. I mean, he could really mentor a guy like Taysom Hill, a guy like Winston. Winston's already learned so much from one of the best quarterbacks of all time, Drew Brees. Then he's listening to another quarterback who's one of the better during our era, and Phillip Rivers. I think it could be very beneficial if Rivers ended up going to the Saints.
Yeah, I mean, Rivers would be the perfect fit for this team, but are the Saints going to shell out a whole bunch of money out of him? I mean, that's going to be the key because the salary cap for the Saints isn't really that good right now. But I mean, we'll see. I mean, who knows? Maybe they call him and maybe he leads them to the Super Bowl. That would be a good story, actually.
Especially for a guy who's played forever. And it's not really been a guy who's been in the postseason much during his time with the Chargers. And especially, just cool because he's played for the NFL so long, hasn't been to a Super Bowl before. Then he comes out of retirement for a, unfortunate circumstance for Winston and leads him to the Super Bowl. And it's crazy because the Saints, they've had so much adversity right now. They didn't have a home game for the first month because, with the storms in New Orleans, with Winston's out now. Michael Thomas hasn't played snap. They've had quite a bit of injuries and things come up, and they still are one of the better teams in the NFC record-wise. And it's just crazy. Sean Payton has done a terrific job and coaching. I feel like somebody else has done a terrific job coaching so far is Mike Rabel, head coach in the Tennessee Titans. The Titans, to me, have done much better than anticipated. I mean, when the Titans played the Chiefs together a couple weeks ago, I mean, Derrick Henry had more passing touchdowns than Patrick Mahomes in that game. I guarantee you nobody thought that was going to happen, but it was nice a couple days ago. Derrick Henry is out with a foot injury. He could be out 6 to 10 weeks. It was announced the Titans have already signed Adrian Peterson, one of the best running backs of all time, and I was honestly surprised he's still on the free agent market. I feel like he done a good enough job with the Lions last season to be on a team this year, but this is very interesting, and they've gave Henry the ball so many times throughout the past couple of seasons. With Tennessee, that's been a big reason of their success the last several years. But now I'm extremely intrigued to watch Ryan Tannehill. Ryan Tannehill has been one of those guys who, he's never really had to prove he's that guy. He's been more of a game manager ever since Henry's really took off. He's never really had to put a team on his back much. And now with Henry out, we're going to have to see Tannehill put the team on his back, something he's really never had to do during his time in Tennessee. You look at his numbers, they're very good. He doesn't throw a ton of picks, but he doesn't throw a ton of yards. It's because he's more of a game manager role. He has turnover-free football, which is great. But now, that's when he kind of has a leash on him. He kind of has a limited amount of things he's going to do because when you're giving the ball off to Henry. With Henry out, with Ryan Tannehill taking over, it's going to have more passing attempts and being more involved in this offense. It's interesting. I'm excited for it. If you're the Titans right now, you better be glad the Colts have had some injury issues and they're doing worse than expected. And you better be glad you're first in the AFC South right now. Because if we were talking about this and if the Colts and Titans were tied in the division, I don't know who would come up on top at the end of the regular season. Because I trust Ryan Tannehill to a certain extent, but he's never really took that next step. I'm really intrigued to see if he's going to be able to take the Titans to the next step without his main guy, Derrick Henry.
Well, first of all, I have Derrick Henry in my fantasy football team, and it's going to really, really, really hurt when I drop him because he has been my savior for fantasy league, and luckily I'm in first place in my my division, so it's going to hurt, but it's going to hurt. It's really going to hurt when I drop him. So, but anyway, I think Adrian Peterson is going to be a good substitute for Derrick Henry, but how much does he have left in the tank though? And also, can that offensive line actually do his job and create pathways for him to run? And yeah, I think Adrian is going to be a very good signing for them, and the Titans going to be it's going to hurt them in the long run, but I think they're going to be okay.
Like I said, I would assume they're going to be okay, but they are very fortunate that the Colts are struggling. Because
yeah, exactly.
I like if you were to tell me like heading into the season, Henry's going to get hurt at some point. If you're a Titans fan, like that's not good because the Colts have been struggling and they should not be. They've been injured at times. Wentz has been hurt, Quentin Nelson's been hurt, but the AFC South, you can go ahead and mark off pretty much. Well, I was going to say guaranteed victory, but I said it against the Jets last week, and I'm sure the Titans said it against the Jets. And look at that, what that happened. More than likely, you got wins against the Jaguars and the Texans, probably the two worst teams in the NFL. And those you can kind of have those. With some of the other games, it's kind of a toss up because you don't know how Tannehill is going to perform against a top notch defense, and because he's never had to be that guy to put him on on your back. You look at probably 90% of other starting quarterbacks in the league, they're the guys who have to put the team on his back. Since he has Henry, he doesn't have to do that. He just hands the ball off, runs away so he doesn't get hit. But with having Julio and trading him for him in the offseason, looking back, I think that's very, very beneficial now. Obviously, you don't know when injuries are going to happen, but if they didn't have Julio right now, that's even more concern. I know he's not what he used to be, but having A.J. Brown and Julio Jones for Ryan Tannehill with Derrick Henry, going to be hurt for a while. That's going to help Tannehill a lot, but I'm still intrigued to see how he's going to perform the rest of the season.
Yeah, do you think the AFC South is a weak division though? Because there's only two good teams in it. Well, if you count the Colts as a good team, but I personally think they're not a good team. The Colts.
I think the Colts are average, but when they're healthy, I think they're good. But regardless, even before the season started, and when I had high expectations for the Colts heading into the season, I had the Colts winning the AFC South. Obviously, that's not going to happen. I had the Titans at like 10 or 11 wins. That's probably going to be around that range. And I was really low on the Jaguars and the Texans. And regardless of the inconsistency of the Colts, you have the Titans, and that's really it right now. Even before the season started, I thought the AFC South was 100% without a doubt the worst division in the NFL. I don't think anything else is possibly comparable. Because when you look at it, the only division that, to me, like you could, like the NFC East, like the Cowboys, and then you have like the Giants. I think they're capable of being the Texans and the Texans and the Jaguars. Every single team in the NFC East would be those two bottom teams. And
I disagree. I think the worst division in football is actually the NFC East. Like you can't really trust the Cowboys one. The football team, they're in shambles right now. The Giants, who knows? I mean, they're just one quarterback away from being great. And you got the Eagles, who it seems to be lost, but they're just there. I don't know.
It's interesting because when you think about the AFC South and you think about the NFC East, they're kind of comparable in the fact you have that top dog in the division. You have the Titans and you have the Cowboys. And then after that, I would say the Colts and Washington's comparable. Like as of right now, I think the Colts would win, but they're both those teams. They've had injury situations, and they should not be that bad. They are underperforming, and they should be much better than they are. And then you have the Eagles, who Eagles aren't good. And then the Giants, who have expectations, but just their record have been, unfortunate, with some penalties against the Chiefs,
Injuries also.
in tons of injuries. I think Barkley, I think he was announced he has the coronavirus, and there's a chance he could possibly be out this week. And you look, the questionable offsides call against Washington, I think week 2, and the AFC South, like the Texans and the Texans and the Jaguars. To me, if they played the NFC East, I think that every single team in the NFC East would beat those teams. So I feel like the NFC East is definitely the worst team in the NFC. I would probably put them number 2, but just because the lack of depth in the AFC South with the Jaguars and the Texans, I would probably have the AFC South as the worst team.
Well, I think we could agree on that, but I think right now, no, for now, but in the past, I think the NFC East has been like the worst team. But I can see your argument for like the South being the worst division in football.
And it's interesting because when you heading into the season, there will be some divisions, and you think, well, that's much better than people think, or that division is really sucky. For instance, think of the AFC West. I think the AFC West is one of the more underrated divisions in the league heading into the season because I've said I don't even know how many times once Denver gets their quarterback, like if Denver got Deshaun Watson, they're 100% Super Bowl contenders. Their roster is incredible, and it's not talked about enough. They just need to find their quarterback. The Raiders, despite everything going on, with John Gruden and Henry Ruggs and everything, they are still first place in the AFC West. There's mind-boggling. The Chargers, they are really good. Then you look at the Chiefs, they are underperforming. Nobody really expected this to happen. And it's interesting because when you look at teams in divisions who, you think they should be better but aren't, with the Chiefs this week, they have heading into the season, you think it's going to be a possible game of the year candidate, between the Chiefs and the Packers. The Packers right now look like they're the best team in the league. The Chiefs look lost. They're barely getting by even in the wins. They beat the Eagles, and they still gave up 30 points against Jalen Hurts, which is just unacceptable. And the Chiefs put the Packers this week, and this was expected to be a fantastic game, but it was announced a couple of hours ago. Aaron Rodgers is out of this game. Jordan Love's going to start. Aaron Rodgers is out because he tested positive for the coronavirus, and he did not get his vaccine, which is very, very interesting because we talked about before the show. August 24th, something like that, it was announced on like a local, Green Bay, news station that Rodgers had the vaccine. Like, this doesn't make any sense. Mike Garafolo and Rappaport both reported this from NFL Network that he has not had a shot. Rodgers said he did have a shot 2 months ago. Like, I have no issues if you're going to take the vaccine or you don't take the vaccine. I'm not going to think of you differently for, taking a shot. But I don't understand why Rodgers would lie about taking the vaccine. That just makes no sense to me. It's kind of ignorant. Like, I don't get why you would do that. If fans don't like you because you don't take a shot or do take a shot, they were never fans of you in the first place, in my opinion. That's just dumb. But it's dumb for lying that you supposedly took a shot, but you didn't. But this game, I mean, this had match of the year all over it, potentially. And then we're going to see Jordan Love against this very, very bad Chiefs team. And as crazy as it sounds, I still don't think it's a guarantee the Chiefs are going to win this game. For whatever reason, the Chiefs were picked to win this game. It's just stupid. It makes no sense. They are not playing as what they should be. The Packers have won 7 straight games. And when you look at Jordan Love, I mean, this could be a very, early indication what you could possibly see next season for Green Bay playing against Kansas City. This should be still an intriguing matchup, but it sucks to see Rodgers out in this game. But I still think it's going to be a pretty nice one between the Chiefs and the Packers.
Well, there's going to be one crucial element for this game. How will the Chiefs defense respond to Jordan Love? I think the Chiefs defense is really, really atrocious. And then that's like one of the reasons why they're struggling along with the offense. But I will have to go with that because the Chiefs defense has been terrible. And the other factor is how will Patrick Mahomes respond to all this? Will he be the Patrick Mahomes of old, or he will be the new Patrick Mahomes this season? Just throwing passes while being sacked, one no-look passes to the other team. Yeah, it's going to be very, very interesting to see how Mahomes and the Chiefs respond to Jordan Love being in the starting lineup now that Aaron Rodgers is out with COVID.
And something else to take, is even if Jordan Love's plays average, like let's say 16 of 25, 200 yards, a touchdown, just some turnover-free football, nothing great, nothing to brag about. The way the Packers defense played against the Cardinals, if Jordan Love just plays like I just said, average, I think I feel pretty confident in the Packers to win because you look what the Packers defense did without their defense coordinator. Going up against the Cardinals, who were the last remaining undefeated team last week on Thursday Night Football. The majority of the game, they were really able to contain Kyler Murray. I know they, could have won it at the end. AJ Green, everything like that. Green Bay got the interception, but when you look at it, like they were able to contain a high-powered offense to Kyler Murray. It was very interesting. I'm excited to see this Green Bay defense, especially when Mahomes struggling. I think this could be another one of those games where Mahomes struggles again, and we're going to be talking about next week. The Chiefs, still bad, stuff like that. I trust this Green Bay defense right now much more than I do the Kansas City offense because even in wins like we saw on Monday, even when they've won games, their offense still does not look good.
Well, yeah, I think it starts with Mahomes, one. But I'm actually more concerned with the Chiefs defense because they have not seen tape on Jordan Love. It's like the Mike White effect when with the Bengals a couple of days earlier. So here's Jordan Love who's going to be thrust into the spotlight, but the Chiefs do not have any tape on him since he hasn't played an official NFL game. So is he gonna throw for over 400 yards like Mike White did, or will he be a dud? And also, this is gonna be like a sneak peek of the Jordan Love era when Aaron Rodgers is gone next season.
And it's interesting because with Mike White, nobody expected him to throw for over 400 yards. I had the Bengals defense and I had the Rams defense against the Texans. I went back and forth the whole week. The very last second, I took the Bengals defense because Corey Davis was out. So without his number one receiver, he was still able to do that. Jordan Love has Devontae Adams, who's arguably the best wide receiver in the league, and Aaron Jones is one of the better running backs in the league. So if Mike White can do that, at that time, the Bengals had a top 10 defense. Jordan Love is capable of having a similar performance than Mike White because how just utter trash this Chiefs defense is. It's going to be a great game. I would not be surprised if the Packers won. As of right now, I'm picking the Packers because I feel like with Jordan Love playing, Green Bay's defense knows they're going to have to step up and play just as good as they did this past Thursday, maybe even better to contain Mahomes. It's going to be a great one. I think it'll be close, but I think Green Bay will take the victory in that one. And, we've kind of talked, about football, pretty much the majority of the time. I kind of mentioned and talked about the college football playoff rankings before you joined and everything. And we talked about the, trade deadlines, all that stuff, some guys out for the season. And one kind of final thing here, I didn't really follow WWE like I used to. And when I was thinking about, topics, what we're going to talk about, I was just randomly scrolling on Instagram and I saw somebody post this and I thought it was pretty interesting. Today is the 7th year anniversary of the New Day, forming. New Day to me is one of my favorite WWE tags. Well, probably one of my favorite tag teams of all time. I would say one of the most bigger names of tag teams of all time in WWE, one of the more well-known ones today. And so do you have kind of like a favorite feud, storyline, match, or anything like that in the New Day?
Oh man, wow! There's been plenty of feuds with the New Day, but I would have to go with that feud with the Usos a couple of years ago. The Hell in a Cell match, that tag team match was just incredible. I think Xavier Woods, Big E, and Kofi Kingston. To me, they're not the number one stable in wrestling history. I got them actually probably in ninth place because there's been plenty of good stables other than them that's better than them, like in terms of having success, popularity. Like for example, you got the NWO, the Heart Foundation, even the Shield recently. You got them. You got the Legion of Doom. You got all these old school tag team and stables that I think is better than the New Day. But the New Day is actually the best stable right now in recent history.
Yeah, I would. And it's interesting because the New Day was wrestling like 15, 20 years ago, 25 years ago. They would not be nearly as popular as they are today because they're much more kind of like the kiddier product, something you want to see, kind of in the Attitude Era. And since wrestling has just been dying year after year after year, the viewership has been decreasing by a lot the last several years. They've not really had much competition when it comes to top stables and, not just WWE, but in, wrestling as a whole. My favorite member in the New Day would definitely probably be, I agree with what you said with the Usos. That was just a fantastic storyline. So I felt like the storylines with them and the Usos were always the best ones. And the I don't know what you call it, like the rap thing on 4th of July when they mentioned Xavier Woods and with Paige. I thought that was pretty
Yeah.
cool.
I remember that.
I think that and just their storyline with the Usos is probably my favorite. But it's crazy because 7 years ago, you did not think the New Day was going to last at all. They're kind of like Retribution. It was one of those things, that they hype up and you think it's going to be crap. And they turn out to be, one of the more popular tag teams in recent memory. And it's just crazy. But, that kind of about really does it, for this episode. Like I said, we kind of talked about the, trades at the NFL trade deadline, winners and losers at the trade deadline. Some, people going to be out the next several weeks, out for the season. Jameis Winston, Thomas out for the year, and the Bengals and Jets recap. So can you kind of tell some of the listeners who can follow you on social media?
Yeah, you can follow me on Twitter at Kenny_sports and on Instagram at Kenny the Sports Guy. Again, on Twitter at Kenny_sports and on Instagram at Kenny the Sports Guy. You can also find me at www.kenthesportsguy.com, Ken with 2 N's. And you can also find me on Amazon Music, Spotify, Google Podcasts, Apple Podcasts, and Stitcher.
Definitely put the links in the description below so you can check out your content, follow you and everything. That about does it for this video. Make sure to like this video and subscribe to the channel. Make sure to follow me, the Sports Dude Hines Show on Instagram and S Dude Hines Show on Twitter. Once again, thank you all so much for listening. I will see you all next time on the Sports Dude Hines Show.